There was once a boy who believed that success grew in places of safety. In his young heart, he imagined that strength came from avoiding struggle, that peace meant protection, and that greatness could only blossom where the winds of life were gentle. He thought that those who lived without difficulty were the ones who would rise the highest. But life, in its timeless stillness, often teaches us truths that oppose our assumptions. During the summer break, the boy traveled to visit his grandfather, a quiet man who lived in a small house surrounded by trees and silence. His eyes held the weight of time, and his presence felt like shade on a hot day, calm, grounding, and without urgency. One golden afternoon, the boy asked, "Grandpa, when I grow up, I want to be successful. Can you teach me how?" The old man said nothing. He simply rose, motioned for the boy to follow, and together they walked to a nearby nursery. Among rows of small green saplings, the grandfather chose two. Back home, he planted one in a wide clay pot and placed it safely near the window. The other he planted outside, where it would face wind, rain, sunlight, and the unpredictable rhythm of nature. He turned to the boy and asked, "Which one do you think will grow stronger?" "The one inside," the boy said. "It's protected." The old man nodded, but his smile hinted at something deeper. Not every shelter is strength. Not every storm is harm. Years passed, as they always do, quietly, without asking for permission. Like wind slipping between branches or time carving lines into the face of stone. The boy, now older, with broader shoulders and deeper thoughts, returned to his grandfather's home. Though taller and seemingly stronger, something in his eyes still searched, still reached for meaning beyond the surface of things. As they sat once more under the same sky where their old conversation had begun, the boy turned and said, "Grandpa, years ago I asked you how to become successful. But you didn't give me an answer. Will you tell me now?" The old man smiled gently, his eyes soft with memory. "Come," he said. They rose together, and the grandfather led him first to the plant inside the house. It stood quietly in its clay pot, green and alive, but small. Its trunk was thin, its leaves were few, and its roots had nowhere else to go. It had grown within the safety it was given, no more, no less. Then they stepped outside. Under the open sky, the boys saw the other plant, now transformed into a great tree. Its branches reached far and wide. Birds nested in its limbs. Its bark was strong and weathered. The boy stared in silence. The grandfather asked, "Which one grew more? Which one became what it was meant to be?" The boy hesitated, then replied, "The one outside. Life grows tallest where the sky is not a ceiling, but a calling." The boy stood before the tree in silence, as if something within him had also taken root. The light filtering through the branches painted soft golden patterns on the ground, like moving prayers written by the wind. He placed his hand on the bark and felt its texture rough, solid, full of silent history. "Grandpa," he asked, his voice filled with wonder, "how is this possible? This tree faced everything, storms, burning sun, cold winds, wild rains, and yet it became stronger than the one inside." The grandfather looked at the boy, then at the tree, as though seeing both at once. "Yes," he said slowly, "and that is the reason it grew this way. It had to struggle. It had to fight for sunlight, hold firm during storms, and search deeply for water when drought came. And because it did, it learned how to survive, and more than that, how to thrive." He walked slowly around the trunk. The one inside was safe, yes, but safety without challenge becomes confinement. The roots could not stretch. The sun never shifted. The rain never tested its thirst. It stayed small, not because it was weak, but because it was never required to be strong. The boy listened, something opening in him like a window to the wind. "Do you understand now?" He nodded, "Not just in mind, but in soul. True growth begins not when we are protected, but when we are brave enough to face the weather." Asterisk, they remained beside the great tree for a long moment, bathed in a silence that spoke louder than words. It was not an empty silence, but one that carried meaning like the hush before dawn, or the stillness of a deep lake. The boy no longer felt the need to ask more questions. Something within him had begun to listen in a new way, not with the ears, but with the heart. The grandfather slowly circled the tree, running his hand across the textured bark. "You see," he said, "this tree did not grow in spite of the storm, it grew because of it. The wind forced its roots to grip the earth. The rain taught it to drink deeply. The burning sun called it upward. Every challenge became its companion in strength." The boy sat beside him, watching the branches move gently with the breeze. They didn't resist. They flowed, bowed, surrendered, and through that they endured. "But it must have hurt," the boy whispered, "to be exposed like that." "Yes," the old man answered. "But pain is not the enemy, it is the sculptor of the soul. Just as a river carves the canyon, suffering can deepen us. Each hardship hollows us, making room for something more profound to grow." He picked up a fallen leaf, dried and delicate. "Even this gave all it had, and now it nourishes what comes next." The boy turned the leaf in his hand. "What breaks us may also bless us, if we allow it." The boy remained motionless, the dry leaf resting in his open palm like a whisper from the past. Though it weighed almost nothing, it carried the story of the tree, the warmth it once received, the storms it had survived, the time it had served. Before letting go, he looked again at the great tree, and it no longer seemed just tall or strong. It felt alive in a deeper way, wise, present, awake. "Grandpa," the boy asked softly, "is that what life is about? Facing hardship so we can grow stronger?" The old man nodded slowly. "It's not that we must search for hardship," he said. "Life brings enough of it without our asking. But when it arrives, we should not fear it, we should meet it. Because hardship, when faced with patience, becomes a teacher. Like the sun calls a flower to rise, challenge calls the soul to expand." They wandered further into the garden, where other trees stood with stories etched into their trunks, some leaning, some twisted, others reaching gracefully toward the sky. The boy paused beside one bent tree with a scarred trunk. "Was this one broken?" he asked. The grandfather smiled. "It was wounded, but it chose to grow anyway. And in growing, it became beautiful." He pointed to a small sapling just sprouting nearby. "That one will have its own tests. But if it trusts the process, one day it too will offer shelter. Even wounded roots can hold the weight of a generous life." Asterisk, they continued walking in silence, the boy listening not just to his grandfather's words, but to the quiet language of the garden, the rustle of leaves, the rhythm of footsteps on soil, the birds calling in the distance. Everything seemed to speak now, not in noise, but in presence. The grandfather stopped beside an old stone bench, weathered by years of sun and rain. He sat down slowly and gestured for the boy to join him. "My son," he said, "success is not what most people think. It's not always a crown or applause. Sometimes it is simply the strength to continue, to stand when life pushes, to love when life wounds, to give when nothing seems left." The boy looked down, reflecting. "Those who seek only ease," the old man continued, "often grow restless. They may feel safe, but deep inside, something remains small. Comfort is not the enemy, but it becomes a prison when we cling to it." He pointed to the open sky. The tree outside had space to grow. It was not limited by walls, it was shaped by the seasons. Its freedom was not protection, it was risk. But risk allowed it to become. The boy nodded, sensing the truth before he could fully name it. "Do not fear the difficult path," the grandfather whispered. "It will test you, yes, but it will also reveal you." The garden was quiet again, but in that quiet, something inside the boy had shifted. Sometimes, The hardest roads lead us home to ourselves. The boy sat beside his grandfather, his thoughts drifting like clouds across a silent sky, slow, full and changing shape with every breath. Above them, the great tree swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. It did not resist the wind. It moved with it, like a wise dancer who has learned not to oppose the rhythm of life, but to flow with it. He watched the way its branches bent but did not break. Its leaves shimmered, not in fear, but in freedom. "Grandpa," the boy asked quietly, "why do we run from pain, if pain helps us grow?" The old man's gaze remained on the tree. "Because pain is unknown, it unsettles. It strips away our illusions of control. But the path of growth and the path of comfort rarely run side by side. Most people seek peace by avoiding storms, but true peace is born only when you can remain still within them." He leaned down and gently brushed aside a bit of earth with his hand. Hidden beneath the surface, strong roots wove themselves deep into the ground. "What supports the visible," he said, "is always invisible. The deeper the roots grow, the more the tree can rise, but roots do not grow deep in still waters. They grow deep when life shakes them." The boy nodded slowly, feeling something shift inside. "Are you beginning to see?" his grandfather asked. "I think I am. Growth is not in avoiding the storm, but in learning how to breathe inside it." They remained seated beneath the great tree, its shade like a quiet blessing stretched across the earth. The air was still, the kind of stillness that listens. The boy drew shapes in the soil with his fingers, circles, spirals, lines that had no destination. The world around him seemed to breathe slower. "Grandpa," he asked, "do all people go through this, pain, struggle? Is it something everyone has to face?" The old man nodded gently. "Yes, my child. Everyone. No one walks through life untouched. Even those who hide from hardship find it knocking eventually. We all face our own winter's times of cold, of loss, of stillness. Some walk through fire, others wander through fog. But no soul escapes the shaping." He picked up a stone and held it in his hand. "But those who walk through this storm awake, who do not close their hearts, come out with something no book can give them. They find something strong and quiet inside. That strength is not borrowed, it's earned, it's grown." The boy looked at him, a crease forming between his brows. "But what if I fail? What if I fall and don't rise again?" The grandfather smiled, eyes calm as a mountain. "Falling is part of walking. And rising again, that is where real wisdom begins. What matters is not that you fall, but how you return." The boy held his breath for a moment. Even the tallest tree must first learn how to grow from broken ground. They rose from the bench and began to walk once more, their steps slow, almost ceremonial, as if honoring something invisible beneath their feet. The air was tinged with the soft hush of leaves shifting in the trees. Sunlight filtered through the canopy above, painting patches of gold across the earth. The garden no longer felt like a place. They had entered something closer to a presence. As they passed again beneath the great tree, the boy's eyes were drawn to its roots, thick, gnarled, and rising above the surface like the hands of the earth reaching outward. They looked ancient and alive, twisted with time, yet solid, unshaken. "Grandpa," the boy asked in a low voice, "how do I know when I'm truly growing? Sometimes I feel like nothing is changing, like I'm stuck in the same place." The grandfather stopped beside a younger tree with a slightly bent trunk, its bark smooth and warm from the sun. He placed his hand gently against it. "Growth is often invisible," he said. "There are seasons where nothing seems to move, but beneath the surface, life is preparing. Roots are stretching, strengthening, deepening. What looks like stillness may be transformation quietly unfolding." He turned to face the boy. "When you feel uncertain or empty, that may be the very place where new strength begins to form." The boy breathed in, slowly, as if taking root himself. In the quiet spaces where nothing seems to bloom, the soul begins to awaken. Asterisk. The garden had grown quieter. The wind slowed. Even the trees seemed to listen. The boy and his grandfather continued, walking beneath the shade of old branches, their feet brushing gently against the earth, leaving no mark. The boy's thoughts were no longer racing. Instead, they floated soft and wide like the sky above them. After a while, they stopped beside a small clearing where sunlight fell fully, illuminating a single young tree. Its leaves shimmered with movement, delicate and alive. The grandfather stood silently, observing it. Then he said, "This tree is not tall yet. It doesn't give shade. It bears no fruit. And still, it is enough." The boy looked at it, puzzled. "But it hasn't done anything," the old man smiled. "It is becoming, and in becoming, it already holds value." He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You too may not yet see the fruit of who you are becoming. But even now, in the waiting, in the learning, in the stillness, you are worthy. You are enough." The boy lowered his eyes, feeling the words sink into him like gentle rain. No one had ever said that to him before, not in a way that felt real. "You don't need to bloom to matter," the grandfather added. "You just need to be rooted and willing." The boy nodded, a small breath escaping his lips like the release of something he hadn't known he was holding. There is strength in simply standing, even before you rise. Asterisk. They continued walking deeper into the garden where the trees grew older, their trunks thicker and darker, wrapped in vines and shadow. The air grew cooler here, hushed and reverent, like entering a sacred temple made not by stone, but by time and root. The boy felt something shift inside him, not fear, not sadness, but a stillness that asked him to listen more than speak. Soon, they came upon a wide tree stump resting at the edge of the path. Its surface was blanketed with emerald moss. Tiny wildflowers grew from cracks in the bark. Insects moved quietly across its surface, and the wood gave off a faint warmth, as though it still remembered the sun. The boy stopped. "Grandpa, was this tree cut down?" The old man nodded. "Yes, many years ago. It stood here tall, proud, full of green life." The boy frowned. "So, now it's just a stump?" The grandfather stepped forward and placed his palm gently on the moss. "Not just a stump," he said. "Now it nourishes the soil. It gives shelter to small lives. It gathers rain. It is no longer growing upward, but it's still giving." The boy crouched and touched the soft green covering. He felt life in it, quiet but real. "Even in stillness," the grandfather said, "we can give, sometimes more than when we were reaching." The boy nodded, letting the words take root. What falls is not lost. It often becomes the foundation for what rises next. They left the old stump behind, continuing along a winding path where roots crossed like old veins and fallen leaves whispered beneath their feet. The boy's gaze now moved differently. He no longer looked only at what stood tall, but also at what had fallen, what rested, what quietly endured. Something had shifted in his way of seeing, as though a door had opened inward. After a while, they came upon a small sapling growing near the edge of the path. It stood no higher than the boy's waist, its leaves tender and trembling in the breeze. Its trunk was thin, its form delicate, but it leaned bravely toward the light. The boy knelt beside it. "Will this one become strong too?" he asked. The grandfather smiled. "If it is allowed to face the sun, the wind, the storm, yes. If it's not overprotected, if it's allowed to be challenged, to stretch, to hold firm, then it will become what it's meant to be." The boy looked at the soft soil around the sapling's base. "So even the little ones have to struggle?" "Especially the little ones," the grandfather said gently. "The struggle isn't cruelty, it's what awakens their strength." He placed a hand on the boy's back. "And the same is true for you. Don't fear the hard days. They are part of your roots. The boy closed his eyes, letting the wind pass through him. Strength begins not in shelter, but in the willingness to meet the world as it comes. Asterisk. They walked in silence for some time, the air thick with meaning. The boy no longer felt the urge to speak every thought. A quiet understanding had begun to settle inside him, like roots finding their way through the dark. The trees above swayed gently, their branches moving like arms in slow, meditative motion. The light had softened to a golden hue, warm and almost sacred. Eventually, the boy broke the silence. "Grandpa, is pain always part of growth?" The grandfather didn't answer immediately. He stepped off the main path and guided the boy into a small clearing. In the center stood a single tree, tall and proud, but visibly marked by hardship. Its trunk had dark scars running through it, and one of its main branches was missing. Yet its leaves were full and green, reaching confidently toward the sky. "This tree," the grandfather began, "was struck by lightning when it was young. It was nearly destroyed. It stopped growing for years. But it didn't give up. Its roots reached deeper. It healed. It adapted." The boy looked at it with awe. "It still grew, even after the pain," the old man nodded. "Not just grew, transformed. Pain didn't break it. It carved out its true shape." The boy reached out and touched the bark, feeling strength behind the scars. "Scars are not signs of failure," the grandfather said. "They are proof you stayed and became. Pain doesn't end the story. Sometimes it's what begins the chapter that matters most." Asterisk. They walked slowly back to the path, the boy glancing over his shoulder one last time at the scarred tree. There was something noble in its imperfection, something honest. It didn't pretend to be untouched by life, and yet it stood tall, offering shade, offering shelter. The boy's steps felt different now, more grounded, as if he too had begun to grow invisible roots. After a few minutes, they reached a shallow stream that crossed their path. The water flowed gently over smooth stones, singing its own quiet song. The grandfather stepped onto a rock and motioned for the boy to follow. As they stood in the middle of the stream, surrounded by movement, the boy asked, "Does everything in life change?" The old man looked down at the flowing water. "Yes, everything. Trees grow, leaves fall, rivers shift, even mountains wear down with time. Nothing stays still forever, even you, even me." The boy crouched, dipping his hand into the current. "Then how do we stay strong if everything moves?" The grandfather smiled. "By learning to move with it. Strength is not about resisting change. It's about adapting without losing your center." He pointed to a stone in the stream. "That rock has been here for years, yet the water moves around it, shaping it slowly. It remains, but it also transforms." The boy nodded, watching the water pass. To live wisely is not to cling, but to flow, to become part of change without letting it erase who you truly are. Asterisk. They stepped carefully across the final stones and reached the far side of the stream. The boy paused and turned to watch the water flow, hypnotized by its rhythm. It never stopped. It never resisted. It danced around obstacles without complaint, shaping the very world through its patience. "Grandpa," the boy said quietly, "I think I understand now. Everything changes and we must learn to move with it. But what about the things we lose along the way?" The grandfather remained still, then slowly sat on a nearby stone beneath a weeping tree. "Loss is part of life, like night is part of the day. What we lose does not always vanish. Sometimes it changes form and finds us again in new ways." He picked up a fallen leaf and held it gently in his hand. "This leaf no longer hangs from the tree, but it returns to the earth, feeding the roots. One day, it may rise again as something new. Nothing truly ends, everything transforms." The boy sat beside him. "So, even sadness has a place?" The old man nodded. "A sacred place. Sadness softens the heart. It makes room for compassion, for understanding, for deeper connection. The boy closed his eyes, letting the breeze touch his face like a soft hand. "I don't want to forget anything," he whispered. "You won't," the grandfather said. "The things that touch us deeply stay with us, even if they change shape. What is loved is never truly lost. It becomes part of who we are." They remained under the tree for a while, the wind weaving softly through its long branches. Boy leaned back against the trunk, silent. His thoughts no longer felt chaotic. They came and went like ripples on still water, visible, but not troubling. A kind of peace had begun to take root inside him, quiet and deep. "Grandpa," he said, "after a while, why don't we learn these things sooner? About pain, change, sadness. Why are we only taught to chase happiness?" The old man smiled gently, brushing some dust from his robe. "Because happiness is bright, easy to admire. It sparkles. But the deeper truths, resilience, patience, compassion, those are forged in the shadows. And most people fear the dark." He paused, then added, "But light that hasn't known darkness is shallow. The sun is warm, yes, but it's the night that teaches us to see." The boy looked up through the branches, where the sky had begun to shift, its blue deepening, touched now by early shades of gold and violet. The day was aging. "So pain teaches us to see?" he asked. "To see clearly," the grandfather replied, "to see beyond ourselves, to see others not as obstacles, but as fellow travelers." The boy thought about the people in his life, some who had hurt him, others he had misunderstood. Something softened in his chest. True sight is not with the eyes, but with the heart that has been broken open and still chooses to see. They began walking again, moving slowly, with the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but sacred. The boy was no longer rushing. Each step seemed to carry the weight of the lessons he had absorbed, lessons not spoken, but lived. The path sloped gently upward now, winding toward a ridge that overlooked the valley. The grasses brushed against their legs. Birds called in the distance. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows that moved with them, like silent companions. As they reached the top, a stone bench waited beneath an old tree, its twisted trunk shaped by many seasons. The grandfather sat first, breathing deeply, and gestured for the boy to join him. Before them unfolded a panorama of quiet beauty, rivers glinting in silver arcs, forests flowing like waves, small homes scattered like whispers in the landscape. It was the same world, but from this vantage point, it seemed gentler, woven together by something deeper than chance. The boy gazed in awe. "Everything feels so different from here." "Yes," the grandfather said. "When you're inside the forest, all you see are trees. But when you climb above, you begin to see the pattern." The boy looked at him. "So is wisdom like climbing?" The old man nodded. "Not to rise above others, but to see more clearly. To understand, not escape." The boy closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the view. Sometimes the answers we seek are not found by moving faster, but by seeing from a higher place. They remained seated in silence, the kind of silence that holds meaning rather than absence. Around them, the wind moved through the trees with a voice that wasn't quite a whisper, but something softer still, like memory. The boy watched the vast landscape below, a patchwork of fields, rivers, and far-off rooftops stitched together by golden light. After a while, he turned toward his grandfather. "Grandpa, what if I forget all of this when I go back to my life? What if I can't find this silence again?" The old man didn't answer immediately. He looked out across the valley, as if searching for the right place to place his words. Then he said, "You may forget the details, but not the stillness. Stillness leaves a mark. Once touched, it waits for you." The boy looked down at his hands. "But how do I return to it?" "Close your eyes," the grandfather said gently. "Breathe deeply, one breath, then another. The silence lives inside you now." You've carried it all along, you just didn't recognize it. The boy nodded slowly, letting those words settle in him like seeds in fertile earth. And when life becomes loud, return to your breath, to the pause between thoughts. That's where the mountain lives now. The boy didn't feel transformed. He felt awakened. Not someone new, but someone real. True silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of something deeper, a voice that only speaks when we're ready to listen. Asterisk, the sun was beginning to descend, casting long, golden rays over the hills. The valley glowed with a soft light that made everything feel sacred. The leaves shimmered, the air cooled, and even the silence seemed to deepen. It was the hour when nature holds its breath, offering peace without asking anything in return. Grandfather stood slowly, brushing the dust from his robes. The boy rose beside him, neither of them rushing. They began to walk down the hill, steps careful, each one leaving behind something unseen, yet deeply felt. The boy's voice broke the silence. "Grandpa, I don't just want to be successful anymore. I want this. I want to feel this peace, even when life gets loud." The old man smiled, his eyes soft. "Then let peace become your home. Let it be the place you return to, again and again, no matter what happens around you. Success might fill your hands, but peace fills your soul." "But what if I lose it?" the boy asked. "What if I forget this feeling?" The grandfather placed a hand on his shoulder, then paused. "Close your eyes, breathe. Stillness is always waiting, just beneath the noise. Begin again, and it will meet you there." They continued walking, and as the trees thinned, the open world greeted them once more. Peace is not the reward at the end of a journey, it is the ground beneath your feet, if only you learn to walk softly enough to feel it. Asterisk, they reached the base of the hill, where the trail met the open land. The forest behind them seemed like a distant dream, though it was only moments away. The boy paused, turning to take one final look at the path they had walked. It no longer looked like just a hill. It had become sacred ground, a place where something invisible had shifted within him. The grandfather stopped beside him, resting one hand gently on the boy's back. "This journey," he said softly, "was never truly about me or the trees, or even the story of the plants. It was about the ground beneath your own feet. About learning to walk with awareness, to breathe with purpose, to listen without needing answers." The boy listened, and this time he didn't try to understand. He simply received. "When you go back," the grandfather continued, "remember this stillness. Carry it into your mornings, into your steps, into the way you treat others. And yourself." The boy breathed in slowly, deeply. The air felt different now. Or maybe he did. "Struggles will come," the old man said. "And that's not a failure, it's life. But if you return to your breath, to the silence within, you'll find strength, not in avoidance, but in presence." The sun touched the horizon, gold spilling across the earth. If this story awakened something in you, don't let it fade. Practice stillness. Share the light. And walk gently through the world with your heart open and your breath steady.